So my name is Arisu, and like you just heard, I'm a junior here at AISG. And I'm here today to talk to you about a topic that at first was really hard for me to decide upon. The concept of the power of change is so ubiquitous, and the idea of metamorphosis so grand that to distill it into just one speech seemed to me at first an impossible task. There was first the motivational angle, where I talked about all the ways in which small, individual, and incremental change could have a wide-spanning impact on the world around us. And then there was the alarm bell speech, where I talked about all the ways in which change in our world seems to be going the wrong way around. Cultural homogenization, income disparity, wildlife extinction, you get the picture. I don't need to go on. And naturally, people who know me in real life will tell you that I tend towards pessimism, so this was a tempting angle for my speech to take. But I decided to be less determined to be negative and instead focus more on an ambiguous aspect of change, where change is not necessarily moving us backwards or forwards neatly along the narrative of progress, but rather moving us around in all directions, all at once, all the time. So I settled on the topic of law, an undeniably important part of all modern societies, but also one that's always changing. And crucially, one that I feel has a really understated importance in our public perception, especially with people of the generation that most of us are a part of. When I tell people that I want to study law, their first reaction is usually, fantastic, you're going to be so rich. But their second reaction is usually, if not, then why? Well, I've got about 5 to 7 minutes to tell you why. So, 200 to 600 statutes are passed by the US Congress every single year. Thousands more are passed internationally, and countless more are amended or repealed each and every single day. This is because the law is built on a concept of representing the common man, that is, to represent the will of society as perceived by legislators. And because the will of society is constantly changing through the natural evolution of human beings and human societies, the law has become one of the best examples of change that we have. For example, with the development of new technologies, the law also changes to regulate them and to ensure that they're being used safely and responsibly. Technologies related to data privacy, cybersecurity, and AI deepfake technology have all been in the news recently with the rise of the digital age and the amendments needed to change the law to suit it, something our legal forefathers never could have foreseen. And when challenges and crises arise, the law is one of the most important tools that we have to combat them. For example, the COVID-19 pandemic, which I know not any of us want to talk about, but there's perhaps no better example of the malleable nature of law and how that empowers governments to enact positive change to protect their citizens, in this case by regulating the spread of the virus. Therefore, there is perhaps no better example of the power of changeability. We can also take this further back. In the past couple of centuries, let's call it 400 years or so, the laws relating to discrimination and civil rights have changed dramatically because the views of societies on these marginalized groups has also changed dramatically. In the past, there existed the hegemonistic public opinion that some groups were lesser than others, and therefore that some groups were more than others, and this was reflected in the law. Women could not own credit cards, First Nations were not considered equal citizens, and slaves could be bought and sold. These seem like extreme examples, I know, but they reflect precedents that have become entrenched in the legal systems that we continue to use today. And they reflect systematic inequalities that have become entrenched in our legal systems that lawmakers and activists must constantly work to repeal. But even though this might paint a bleak picture of our current systems, the power of change is clear here. Our current society's values do not reflect these same standards, or not to the same extent anyways, and so it follows suit that our laws shouldn't either. Therefore, it is the natural conclusion that as society metamorphosizes through progress, in other words, making progress, the law should follow suit. But this could not happen if not for the gift of change, if not for the gift of embracing the fact that the law can be fluid instead of constrained, and that we can let go of expectations for the law to be completely determined and to never change. After all, how can progress really exist within constraints? Unfortunately, it's not always as cut and dry, and it's also not always as positive, in my perspective anyways. The law can also be amended against the will of the majority of society that it claims to serve. The most popular example that you'll all be familiar with is Roe versus Wade in the United States, where the Supreme Court system that they utilized there enabled them to overturn abortion despite the fact that 58% of Americans wished for this constitutional right to remain. But this is also an example of the subjectivity of law, which is part of its ambiguity. In my perspective, this is not demonstrative of positive change. But let's say for a Catholic Church leader with a somewhat vague understanding of democracy, it may very well be. But the important part here is that we would both be part of the will of society that law changes to reflect. We would both be aspects of the common man. Positive or negative, the power of change is clear here too. Now, it is important that it's been said that although I enjoy reading case study summaries and enjoy reading introductory law books in my free time, I am no barrister and I am no Supreme Court justice. I am rather the opposite. I am just 16. And I have no advice to offer, nor do I pretend to have any wise wisdom to impart. But what I can do is talk about something that I find both interesting and important, and leave it up to you guys whether you agree with me or not. So if you do agree with me by the end, in a couple of minutes, I'll have one simple request for you, but not yet. So for now, allow me to digress a little bit. Here is the legal goings-on in the world in 30 seconds. A gross oversimplification, of course. Donald Trump is trying to persuade the Supreme Court to endorse complete criminal immunity for ex-presidents of the United States. Gambia overturned its law against female genital mutilation, or FGM, just last week. The United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights announced clear violations of international humanitarian law and potential war crimes in Israel and Gaza. And in the Scottish Parliament, the Parliament is trying to pass a bill that would widely redefine and widen the scope of what human rights even are, the first country in the United Kingdom to do so. I believe, you might not agree, but I believe that these all serve to prove my point that these cases deserve your attention, and the law deserves more attention than you might perhaps give it all every day. The thing is that this process, in which the law contorts itself to adapt to the changes of society, isn't passive. It doesn't happen without us, because it can't. It requires our involvement, through calling our lawmakers, getting involved in political parties and local government in whatever ways we can, and through the simple act of voting, however tired of hearing this you might be. Now, I'm also aware that AISG is lucky enough to foster an extremely international community, and that all of our nationalities have different systems, and therefore different extents and methods to which people can get involved in the lawmaking process. Admittedly, I find some systems better than others, but that's up to personal opinion. But nevertheless, the law is always a product of all of us. There is always a system that exists, no matter what it may be. In other words, we are the change, and law is the power to overutilize the prompt of this event. And that is the power of change through law. It is never the same from one day to the next. Rather, it presents us with a system that is so fluid, so changeable, that we become the ones who are powerful. It enables us to be the ones to challenge injustice, to hold positions of power accountable, and to create an equitable and just society, whatever that might mean for us. But the danger of going the other way is also extremely present in my mind. Not to plagiarize Uncle Ben, but with great power comes great responsibility, and therefore great ability for things to go wrong. When we accept the ability for things to go wrong, you'll understand that, like I said, I don't have grand insights to offer, nor do I expect you to walk away changed fundamentally in any ways. But I hope that you'll understand that I feel a little bit sick of so little attention being paid to an aspect of change that is so malleable and so monumental, and therefore with so much ability to go wrong if ignored, and if we continue to treat the law the way we treat it today. From where I sit, or stand, as a young woman growing up in Gen Z in today's world, it seems to me like we're in an era where people care more about social justice issues than ever before. People care more about politics, people care more about raising awareness of social justice issues, people care more about non-governmental organizations, and people care more about whatever the daily Twitter feud is. But while I understand the importance of all these institutions and all these practices, except for the Twitter stuff, I do worry that the law gets lost in all of this. The law has instead become stereotyped as a greedy pursuit that only fans of Harvey Specter who want to cosplay him and make a lot of money while doing it would ever choose to pursue. And this stereotype is admittedly somewhat fair, but it does ignore the law as the aspect of the law as an agent for positive change. I worry that in seeing the law as bureaucratically boring or somehow distant from our everyday practical lives, or worst of all, as something unchangeable and therefore as a hopeless pursuit, we run the risk of adopting a tendency, a dangerous habit, of ignoring legal goings-on. And by ignoring legal goings-on, we throw away this golden opportunity that we've all been given, however big or small we find that opportunity to be in our country, to enact change, and to make our part of the will of society, to make our part of the common man heard. By giving in to distraction, or disillusionment, or simple disinterest in the law, we allow bad faith actors to walk away unscathed, and we allow millions of lives to be changed behind the scenes. Because that's the truth. With every bang of the gavel, millions of lives are changed, whether it's a higher court ruling that directly impacts millions of constituents, or a single case ruling that sets a legal precedent that you may one day be judged by. So, as promised, I've reached my end, and if you agree, still with everything I've said, my one request is very simple, that we all pay a little bit more attention to what's going on in the legal world around us. Thank you.